everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to tackle a really interesting question, one that gets right to the heart of morality and power. We're going to take a look at a very old idea about what it means to be good and see if it actually holds up when we look at history. So let's dive right in. You've probably heard some version of this, right? It's this cynical little piece of wisdom that says being good, being honest, kind of puts a target on your back. The idea that your kindness can be mistaken for weakness, leaving you wide open to people who aren't playing by the same rules. And that really leads us to a huge dilemma. Is being a good person actually a disadvantage in this world? Are your values a liability when you're up against raw power? It's a heavy question for sure, but I think history might just have the answer for us. So, to kick things off, let's look at some people from history who were, without a doubt, good people. Their intentions were noble, but, well, their stories ended in tragedy. This is what happens when goodness has no power to back it up. I mean, you start to see a really clear and tragic pattern here. You have Wen Tiansong's incredible loyalty, Sophie Scholl's unbelievable courage. These people had immense moral virtue. But whether it was Socrates just trying to get people to think, or Olympe de Gouges fighting for basic human rights, they all had one thing in common. They lacked the real, tangible power to defend themselves and their ideals against a force that was just too big. So here's the key takeaway from this. Their goodness made them heroes, absolutely, but it didn't make them safe. It seems that just having the moral high ground isn't enough to defend the territory. Now, that paints a pretty bleak picture, I know, but hold on, because that's only half the story. All right, so let's flip the script. What happens when that goodness, that benevolence, is backed by some real strength? Let's check out a different group of people who manage to match their ideals with the power to actually make them happen. And wow, what a different story we get here. You have Zhang Zhuzhang using his political clout, Ashoka with the might of an entire empire, or Harriet Tubman with her incredible strategic mind and courage. They didn't just believe in good things, they had the means to do them. In every single case, you could say their goodness was the engine, but power was the vehicle that drove it forward. This comparison just hits the nail on the head. Look, both men had good intentions and the people's support, but one lacked a stable base, no real power, and it led to him constantly being on the run, relying on others. The other channeled that support, built a movement, and gained actual institutional power, and he transformed an entire country. The intentions might be similar, but the power, or lack of it, completely changed the outcome. So, what does this all mean? We've seen two totally different patterns. Goodness that's vulnerable, and goodness that's actually effective. And this brings us to a really powerful conclusion, one that might feel a little backwards at first. First things first, we need to be really clear about what we mean by invincible. When we say that, we're not just talking about armies and weapons, not at all. Invincibility, in this context, just means having the capacity to protect your values. It could be political power, financial independence, a huge social network, or just being an expert in your field. It's the ability to act without getting crushed. And that, right there, leads us to the big idea of this whole explainer. You know the old saying, the benevolent are invincible? But what if history is telling us the complete opposite is true? That it's not that good people are automatically powerful, but that you must first become powerful, or invincible, so that you can then afford to be truly good. In other words, real goodness, the kind that actually changes things, it's not some passive, quiet virtue. It's an active job. It means you have to get the strength, the resources, the position you need to make sure your good intentions can actually survive in the real world and make a real difference. Strength and benevolence aren't opposites. They're partners. You kind of need both. Okay, so that's all great for these big historical figures, but what about us? Right now, in our lives, how do we take this big idea and actually use it to protect our own goodness? And look, building your own invincibility isn't about being aggressive or becoming a bully. It's about building your capability. Things like working towards financial independence so you're not making decisions out of desperation. Building a strong network of friends and allies who have your back. Developing skills that make you valuable. Gaining some influence in your world. And just understanding the rules of the game you're playing. So I'm going to leave you with that question to chew on. Being a good person is the starting line, for sure, but it's not the finish line. The real challenge, and maybe the real virtue, is in building the strength to make that goodness actually count for something. In your world, what does that look like? Thanks for tuning in.